Welcome to Podfic Galore. I'm your horrible online reader, Goldscythe. I read out loud fanfictions for you busy bees, free of charge and no strings attached. Today I will continue reading the Silmarillion fic by Aeolian Sands from Archive of Their Own called The Rescue Party. I hope you can at least try to enjoy my voice, and I will try my best for you with the equipment available to me. On with the show. The Rescue Party, Chapter 18. Plotting in Mandos. Finrod Felagund was enjoying his last bout of freedom before the Feanorians, as described in Madros's letter, descended on him from on high. It was a beautiful spring day, one of those days when the sun was just the right temperature and all was light and pleasant. His mount, Yavian, trotted with a joyful step, and he wondered why the calm before the storm always manifested in perfect weather. Of course, leaving a literal mountain of letters behind for Tinwe to take care of also did wonders for one's mood. He was lucky to have such a dedicated friend. Finrod smiled and closed his eyes, but the mental image of Tinwe barking at him to take care of his own lordly duties ruined the moment of peaceful reflection. He really ought to make sure Artanis hadn't secretly taught him some of her craft. The last thing he needed was for his advisor to have a link into his mind. He would never be able to sleep or relax again. Work, work, work yourself to death, son of Arafinwe. Yes, that is what Tinwe would blur into his brain 24 hours a day. Sometimes Finrod worried for Tinwe's scribe, Erestor, the one who ended up actually writing all the letters when Finrod had been healing. Tinwe didn't always practice what he preached, so poor Erestor was going to grow up to become an exasperated workaholic. Suddenly, Yavian stopped short and snorted. "What is it, girl?" Finrod asked, looking up to see the most unusual sight. A silver-haired Eleth, with a hair color that Finrod had rarely seen east of the sea, was sitting on the grass and hugging a baby wolf. "She looks Telerin, maybe one of Kirdan's people," he commented to his horse, but in his own mind his words were phrased differently. "She looks like Mom." He quickly chided himself for that thought. His mom was safe in Eldamar, and she would never follow him here. "Stay here, girl," commanded Yavian, dismounting. Slowly he approached the clearly distraught Eleth on foot. She was facing away from him, and he did not wish to frighten her. "Hello? Are you all right?" he asked quietly in Sindarin. The Eleth's shoulders suddenly tensed, but she did not turn around. The wolf in her lap looked over her thin shoulder, large blue eyes staring mournfully into Finrod's own. Finrod decided to try again, this time in Telerin. "Hello, my friend. What is wrong?" Then the Eleth lifted her head. She gently placed the wolf on the ground and stood, turning to face Finrod. The king of Nargothrond gasped, his mouth falling open, for there before him stood none other than his wonderful and kind mom. It may have been a spell, a trick of the enemy, but Finrod found he didn't care. He ran for his mom and gave her the biggest hug, lifting her off the ground and spinning her around several times. The little wolf pup danced around their feet. Finrod, is that you?" Erwin asked in a shaky voice, clutching the back of his tunic. "Yes, Amme, it is me. How I have missed you." Her thin but strong arms wrapped tighter around him. "I've done something terrible, Arato," she whispered. "Nonsense, Amme," he laughed, gently setting her down. He looked into her blue turquoise eyes and smiled. "You are the kindest woman to have ever lived." "No," and Finrod frowned when he saw tears begin to leak from his mom's eyes. "I did. I told your uncle we should trust him. But I was wrong. I was so wrong, and now he has been taken." The wolf pup whimpered, and Erwin bent down to pick it up. Finrod was not sure what to make of its presence here. However, he let it be, since it seemed to comfort his mother, so he let it be. "It can't be all bad, yet your words confuse me. Did you come here with one of your brothers?" Finrod didn't like the implications of that. Despite the close kinship, he doubted any of the Telerin lords would be particularly forgiving of his decision to follow kinslayers. "Oh no, I meant Feanaro. He broke out of Mandos with Nolofinwe, and we were traveling together with Nedonel and Anaire and Karnister too. But then Moringoto's lieutenant disguised himself as an emissary of Aule, and I believed him. He has taken Fëanor and flown him away to Angamando. It was unfortunate that the only thing Finrod's brain wanted to dwell on was the imagined voice of his sister saying, "I told you so," over and over. Unfortunate because he really wanted to think about the wine he had last night and who must have drugged him. However, the "I told you so" morphed into, "Really, brother? You are going to pretend to be hallucinating rather than admit that I saw this coming?" And he had to admit that Artanis had been right, as usual, and that he had escaped the little flame on his desk lamp to land into a fiery pit of Balrogs. The realization of his doom prompted a sudden desire to run for the caves. After all, there had to have been several dozen updates about the wheat supply levels in that heap of correspondence. Edestor could be so highbrow that leaving that to him and Tinwe would lead to a miscommunication with the farmers. Therefore, he really ought to take care of that himself, and do so immediately before diving into fury pits. Then he imagined his advisor's look of smugness. It was terribly easy to picture. Tinwe standing tall in his office, arms crossed and carrying some scroll that looked vaguely like a weapon. He smiled hawkish and full of teeth. Like Morgoth staring down a fruit fly, so too would Tinwe stare down at poor Finrod, helpless behind his desk. No, he would never give the elf the satisfaction. Perhaps reborn uncles wouldn't be so bad. Finrod sat down in the grass to give his head a moment to think. Erwan followed his lead and sat next to him, still holding the wolf pup, who looked about ready to take a nap in the afternoon sun. They sat in silence for several minutes. At last, Finrod heaved a great sigh. "Well, first, this mess isn't your fault. It might be Namos for letting the dead return too early, or maybe it's Fëanor's for—" "No, Naro didn't trust Maya. He knew! It wasn't his fault." "Very well. Yet it is still better to trust first than it is to condemn a good man to scorn by false judgment." Erwan laughed. "You sound like my friend, the Maya Olorin. Has he been talking with you?" Finrod chuckled at the mental image of Ainur coming to Nargothrond. His city was beautiful and dear to his heart, but it still welcomed both kinslayers and the occasionally rowdy man. Finrod had the distinct feeling he was not obeying the "keep the secret" command very well either. "Oh, now," he told his mom, "I am not nearly so important to get visits from your Maiar friends. I haven't seen any Ainur besides Melian and the servants of the enemy since, well, the darkening. Though Ulmo did come to me in a dream once." Erwan frowned. "They haven't totally abandoned you. Osse and Ulmo helped us get here." Finrod threw a lopsided grin. "They just have a soft spot on you." "Not at all. They fear Fëanor and Nolo going unsupervised." "Ah, a rational fear," Finrod thought. "Then they are wise," he said out loud to his mom. "But Fëanor was taken captive? Where are the others? Where is Adar?" "We were supposed to rendezvous where Narok met the Syrian." "Oh, of course." "What is it?" Erwan asked, seeing the concern on his face. "Turko has been claiming that it is his favorite hunting spot." "Come, we must not let father be so outnumbered. I know a fast way." It was time to chase down some cousins and save his Atar. Erwan nodded, then looked down at the wolf. "Absolutely not. Oh no, it looks cute now, but it's a wolf pup. It will grow to be a cruel and evil creature of darkness. Leave it," he pleaded. "Son," Erwan replied, her voice flat and commanding as she took the baby into her arms. It looked at Finrod with big round eyes that might just work on thing on himself, much to Luthien's chagrin. Finrod stood no chance. "I am keeping it. It deserves better than foul, lying servant of Moringotto." Finrod grumbled as he went to his horse. Juan would be delighted to have an accomplice, and the Kitchens of Nargothrond would be displeased, to say the least. Now they would have two hungry creatures asking for treats. Alas, he had always endeavored to make Nargothrond a safe haven for all. Apparently, that now included Sauron's wolves. Orodreth would throw a fit. Manwe stood at his place in the Ring of Doom, frowning because only Osse had answered his summons. Namo's seat was notably empty. Ulmo's had been vacant for over a month. "Osse!" Manwe's thunderous voice addressed the Maya of the Storms. "Yes, my king?" Osse asked, bowing politely. He had even put in some effort into his appearance today, brushing his tangled hair out and putting on a shirt. Where are the others? Well, Aryan is steering the sun. I know that! Of course. She asked me to relay any messages. Uinen, unfortunately, was not ready when I called her. Apparently she can't get her hair quite right, and thinks she looks like a vagabond. I know better than to mess with her on a bad hair day. Manwë sighed. Ossa knew that the Eldar King understood that pain quite well. He purposefully did not look at Varda and her dark mane that had crystals like stars expertly woven into it. Aryan and Uinen played a small part in the unfolding disaster. Their absence is regrettable and has been noted. However, the weight of my disappointment rests on you, and Lord Ulmo, and especially on Namo. Where are they? My master is no doubt on some errand in Endore. He loves that land greatly, as he loves the children. Isn't Namo always in Mandos? What trespass did he commit? Lord Namo brought an elf back to life, Esther explained quietly. Well, there were two of them, Ossa muttered. Not those two. Makalaura Kanafinme was dying, and Namo sent him back to his Ra. Ossa nodded, not quite understanding why it was such a big deal. Yes, well, Namo does like peace and quiet. Kana would have driven him to insanity, singing laments. Lotta placed a hand on her husband's shoulder. Namo accidentally infused the elf with some of his power. Hopefully, Makalaura never realizes it, but the potential is there for him to be incredibly dangerous. No more dangerous than Melkor, also wanted to say, but then held his tongue. He must have spent too long with Fëanor. Well, my lords and ladies, my master and I were simply hoping to divert the path of destruction from blessed Valinor. Fëanor and his brothers exploded a tree into so many shards that if I did not protect them, all three would have died by splinters to the heart. That type of destructive does not belong to on this side of the sea. Yvonne nodded. It does not. Very well, Osse. Promise me not to go about ferrying elves across the sea whenever you feel like it, and this discussion can be over. I promise to ask you first. Lady Este? Yes? Go find Namo. I still need to talk to him. Namo was having a panic attack. For countless millennia, his life had been grim and predictable. Of course, it wasn't entirely true. There was the horrendous day that Tulkas had thrown a chained Melkor into his halls. Those 3 ages had been... The Lord of the Dead shuddered. He didn't even want to think about how those 3 ages had been. And then there had been the day the king of the Noldor had been slain, along with Telperion and Laurelin. Perhaps he should have packed his bags and begged Eru to take him out of Arda at once. It would have saved his sanity, for no sooner had Finwë arrived and immediately began pleading for his wife's release than Telri and Noldor Fear began arriving en masse, some of them still fighting with each other. Namo had nearly pulled his hair out, and in a moment of frustration and anger had shouted to Finwë, Fine, your majesty, but you shall stay here forever! Then he had found his longest, darkest robe and gone to Tol Eressëa to pronounce the doom of Mandos. That had, of course, gone quite poorly. Don't give dooms while stressed should have been common sense. Yet his kin had let him do it anyway, encouraged it even, because what better way to deal with elves gone savage than to pass them off to Namo in Mandos? Out of sight, out of mind! Thus, in his great frustration, he had managed to curse the elves and himself several lifetimes of misery. They were doomed to be slain, and he was doomed to play host to their disembodied selves. Thankfully, with Vida's help, it'll bless her, things in Mandos eventually quieted down. Of course, he occasionally would have to deal with an outburst or two, especially when the frozen Feara from Helcaraxe met the Feanorian contingent. Yet, every year that passed saw this episode become less and less frequent. The Bragolok had been a bump in the road, but it seemed as if the elves, and himself, might just get out of this cursed existence intact. They could be re-embodied in Valinor, and he would have his peace again. Of course, Fëanor had to ruin it all. Now Manwë, Lord of the Airs, wanted his skin. Now had grown quite attached to this fauna and was in no mood to waste energy creating another one. Did the Eldar King not appreciate his work? Did he not appreciate that elves were not supposed to die and that men were supposed to pass quickly to the world beyond, and that the whole point of him taking the lordship of the halls in the first place was that they were supposed to be empty. Yet, despite his quiet residence being overrun by burning fire, he had still toiled faithfully for countless years. But now Manwe had the call to summon him like a disobedient servant. Him who was forced to do 3 times the work of any other Vala. And you know what, Manwe? I'm done trying to play this game. In retrospect, Namo should have felt himself snapping again. He should have realized that the last time he was in this mood, he ended up dooming just about everyone. However, as it was, Vada was overseeing the final touches of this month's wonderful tapestries, so no one was here to stop him. He marched through his halls and his feet were like thunder. Finwë himself found him and raced to his side. My lord, Manwe's solution is to yell at me. Finwë, I've had it at last. Do you see these tapestries? Melkor is running amok over the sea. I know the black soul. For 3 ages of this world, I had to deal with him and his twisted thoughts. All the while, everyone else ate and drank. I do one thing, just one thing to try and preserve the peace, and I get scolded for it. I've had it with this watching business. The sooner Melkor is destroyed, the sooner elves stop dying. The sooner I can have a quiet in my own house again! My lord, I agree, but it's over, King Finwë. Do you want me to help your sons and grandsons or not? Aegnor, whose fare was like the golden beams of sunlight, walked into the throne room of Mandos and found his brother already there, Angrot's spirit manifesting like grey clouds before a thunderstorm. He was standing by the marble pillar with his arms crossed. Aegnor, what do you suppose is this all about? His brother asked him. I don't know, Aegnor admitted. It wasn't likely anything they had done. He had minded his own business, spending long days alternating between dreaming of Andreth or his family and suffering nightmares of holding perilous Dorthonian highlands. Well, it wasn't me this time, Aradhel announced. Her fare was like a white blizzard, wild and beautiful. There was a sound of creaking wood, and all turned to see Pitio and Elanwe emerge from one of the doors near the pack. Ambarosa was wispy and fragile with scars across his heart. Yet Aegnor knew that Elanwe had always been motherly and kind to him. She let him take his time to find a seat on one of the benches that lined the far side of the cavernous room. Aegnor noted that not a single Sinda or Teler had been called, and that everyone in this room was related rather closely to the House of Finwë. Not a good sign at all. If we need to make a hasty exit, which way is the best? He asked his brother. Behind me. Most Fae prefer the southern wings, but the north have more shadows and greater cover, Angrot answered. Aegnor smiled. War had at the very least taught them the value of an exit strategy. Their wait was not long. From behind the towering marble pillars opposite them came Namo himself, wearing his long grey cloak. His white hair was glistening and long, and as always, his eyes cut the darkness. Slowly, he sat on his stone throne. Eldar of the House of Finwë, he addressed, his voice calm, but there was tension behind it. For a long moment, no one answered. Then Elanwe stood and bowed. We are here as you asked, she spoke for the others. Thank you. Now where is Irise? I have a question for you. Irise did not cower. I was afraid you might. Yet I do not know if I will have an answer. Noma chuckled darkly, which was odd. Mandos usually hated riddles and preferred to speak plainly with few words. Furthermore, the master of the dead never chuckled. Have you seen your father in these halls? He asked. The silence was deafening. Aegnor looked at his brother's ghostly eyes. Come to think of it, have any of us seen Nolofinwe? No, my lord, Iris answered. Would you like to? Namo asked. Aegnor frowned. This sounded almost threatening. Aradhel began, never the most eloquent of the cousins unless roused to fury. Lord Namo, please tell us what is this about. I have something to show you all. I borrowed this from Mahanaxar. From his robes, Namo produced a palantir-type stone, although it was much larger. Your father, Namo began, waving a hand over the stone, is here. At once the artifact produced a ray of light, which showed Nolofinwe himself in his own body, pointing sternly to a collection of mushrooms. Arafinwe stood at his side, a perplexed expression on his face. The king of Tirion seemed to consider something. Then he reached for the only death cap in the collection. Namo shut the scene down just as Fingolfin was hitting his brother over the head with a satchel that Agnar swore belonged to Gelekorm. Amron at that point had wandered closer. "And don't get me started on your father, young one," Namo began, waving a hand again, and there in the projection was Feanor free-falling out of the sky. A giant eagle was attempting to catch the unconscious elf while it held in one talon something that looked suspiciously like Eonweb, but that made no sense. It was Aredhel that noticed the white city in the background. "That is Ondolinde!" "Yes," Namo nodded. "Is that father in Beleriand?" "Deathcaps don't grow in Valinor," Angrod pointed out. "Yes again," Namo continued. He was standing now. Agnar began to realize just what situation had put the stoic Vala on edge. Through a couple of accumulated mistakes, we have a situation. However, at this point, there is no stopping it. Everything I tried to do only makes it worse." "You're planning something." Aradhel nodded, a fear glint in her eye. "Lord Namo, this is a new side of you." "It is an old side, Lady Irise. I have only ever wanted to be left alone. Now look at my halls." "So I propose a deal. I will let you free. You would have found Feanor's escape route soon enough anyway, so go now. I only ask that you fight Melkor together with your kin, and that this time you win. Let us have no more death, destruction, and chaos. Should you lose, I assure you Manuel will be throwing us all into the void." Irise smiled. "Of course, we will not lose." Agnar wondered, was he the only one capable of thought? "Lord Mandos," he asked, "what about the doom of the Noldor? Can we move it?" Namo frowned. "No, unfortunately." Aredhel's fear began rippling. Agnar knew at once that an infamous Irise speech was around the corner. She could be as fiery and convincing as Feanor, save that her words always burned cold. "Well then," she began, "if we are doomed to shed tears unnumbered, if every good intent of ours ends in ruin, then let us at least bring the enemy down to the pits of torment with us." Agnar smiled and raised his golden fist. That was his cousin, all right. "I hear thee, sister," he agreed. Angrod nodded. Elenwe and Ambarosa looked less sure until something fierce crossed the young twin's face. "I will see my brother again," he declared, his voice shaky, for these were the first words he had spoken in a long time. "I will see my brother again, and I will fight for him, and die with him if I must, but never again shall we be part." All eyes were on the Vanya Eleth now. She smiled broadly. "With speeches like these, you will give Feanor a run for his might. They were not needed, though. I have ever yearned to see my husband and daughter again. No lofty words or great dreams are needed to compel me. Let me hold him in my arms again and let me kiss my child good night, and I will be complete." Irise reached for her hand. "I wish to see my child too, and bring doom to Moringatto," she shrugged. Namo nodded. "Very well. In that case, right this way." Finwë stood in the shadows, watching the commotion. He sighed, feeling older than even the ancient Lord Mandos himself. So much energy. Didn't they see they were missing someone? Slowly he made his way to the small gardens and a little hot spring that was afforded the fare of the elves. Only that no one knew about it, and he wasn't about to tell anyone. It had been his own private retreat. At least it had been private until Aragorn had found it. He stared now at his grandson. Aragorn's spirit could be seen relaxing in the hot waters of the spring, hair bound in a lazy bun and head bent backwards, resting on a rock that served as a pillow. "Your cousins are about to be re-embodied and sent to Beleriand," he said. Aragorn didn't even open his eyes. "I went to Beleriand once," he muttered. "It was cold." "So you don't want to go?" Aragorn opened one eye halfway. "Are you going?" "You know I cannot. I can never leave this place." Aragorn sighed and rolled, bringing his forearms to rest on the rock. Although his fear expressed itself as blue energy, Finwë swore that his back looked red from being in the hot water too long. "Yes, you traded yourself for Miriel, but you never know, grandfather. Mandos might be able to release you still." Finwë frowned. Aragorn used to be as energetic as Fingon and Aradhel. The halls had changed him. "You are becoming slothful," he teased. walking over to sit in front of his grandson on one of the garden rocks. I have just learned how to recognize disaster before it strikes. Irise, Aikanaro, and Angarato are nearly as bad a combination as my father and my uncles. Don't you remember how the three of them would go hunting with Tuelko and Kurvo? Nelia always had to go to rescue them. They fell off a cliff once. They got Juan stuck in a tree, and don't forget the sinkhole. Finwë conceded the point. Very well. I am glad not to be fully abandoned in these halls. Yet, if it goes poorly for your siblings and cousins, promise me that you will offer to go yourself and help. You are a skilled healer by now. You have been learning from that one Maya, White's servant. Asia serves Lady Este. However, you are right. I have learned much from her. For example, that purplish flower behind you can be used to help a blood clot in an open wound. He sighed. Asia would want me to go too, he said, speaking almost to himself. Louder. Asia would want me to go too, he said, speaking almost to himself. Louder, he announced to Finwë. Very well, I cannot disappoint both my grandfather and my dearest friend. I promise if you promise to go with me, if truly we must. Finwë bowed his head. I can only promise to ask for Mandos' pardon, though maybe it will never come to that. We do have many kin already fighting the darkness. Oh, it will come to that, Argan said simply, dragging himself out of the pool. Here, let's get some herbs together for the inevitable. You start by picking those purple flowers. I'll go find something with which to grind them. End of chapter 18. Stay tuned.